Hey friends, this is Jeff. This is the Reading Room. We're on Brené Brown, Atlas of the Heart, Chapter 5, Places We Go When Things Aren't What They Seem. I really enjoyed this chapter. This chapter is less about emotions in my view and much more about how the centers kind of work. And so there's actually a lot of Enneagram material worth talking about as we get into this. If you are interested in discussing this chapter and the rest of the book with us, do go to aroundthecircle.org, sign up for a membership, look for our announcements of when we meet, and sign up. We would love to have you. We're looking for another 5 or 10 people to discuss this with us, and we have a great time on Tuesday nights talking shop. So if you're interested, aroundthecircle.org. Now, to get into this, she doesn't just jump into the emotions like she sometimes does. There's an intro to this chapter, and she begins by writing, "What happens when we feel two competing emotions at the same time? Can two seemingly contradictory thoughts be true? Welcome to being human. Competing emotions and contradictory thoughts are messy and can feel uncomfortable, vulnerable, even irritating. You will notice competing emotions, contradictory thoughts, those could be two different centers. The emotions that come out of the heart center, the thoughts that come out of the thinking center. What happens when these are in conflict?" She continues, "The problem starts when we don't have the skills or experience to tolerate the uncertainty and ambiguity, and we give in to the cravings for neat, mutually exclusive categories. There's nothing more limiting than tapping out of tension and oversimplifying the thoughts and feelings that have the power to help us understand who we are and what we need." Who we are, identity, what we need. There is desire, wants, motive written all over that. But what my mind goes to immediately, because I'm a 1 and she's a 1, is these mutually exclusive categories. It's very common for ones to experience the world in that way. And in order to get control, understanding, and navigate, we lean heavily into that space. And she rightly is saying, for ones and for everybody else, that this may not be the best way to balance your life, that there is real value in living open-handedly, and that's where things are going to go. Finding balance across the centers is what I read here, and well worth talking about this. This is a topic we hit numerous times in the last book we talked about, Dr. Siegel's book on wholeness and therapy. There is something about our primary center. 2, 3, 4 is your primary center, is your heart. 5, 6, 7 is your primary center, is your head. 8s, 9s, 1s, your primary center is your body. Something about your primary center that pushes and elevates a primary need, desire, want, motive, and that motive needs to get balanced by your other centers. Otherwise, we drift into excess, and excess is our unhealthiest self. She is right to name that even though it can be uncomfortable, this is a place of growth, health, stability, even insight, and into ourselves. So get ready for that. And that's how this intro starts. She quotes her podcast partner, I believe, Adam Grant. He says this in his book, Think Again. "As consumers of information, we have a role to play in embracing a more nuanced point of view. When we're reading, listening, or watching, we can learn to recognize complexity as a signal of credibility. We can favor content and sources that present many sides of an issue rather than just one. When we come across simplifying headlines, we can fight our tendency to accept binaries by asking what additional perspectives are missing between the extremes." This is something that's hard for me. It is also something that I think is a virtue, the ability to see multiple sides. I believe when we did Shui's book, that's like objectivity in her mind. It's like just being able to see all of the things. And that strikes me as a worthy virtue. I'm not sure that that's objectivity, but it is a worthy virtue, and it's a fantastic habit. I think 5s and 9s have a much easier time with this sort of thing, given their motive. And some of the rest of us may need to learn it. Adam Grant continues, and I found this really helpful, especially because I'm a content creator. He says, "This applies when we're the ones producing and communicating information too. New research suggests that when journalists acknowledge the uncertainties around facts on complex issues like climate change and immigration, it doesn't undermine their readers' trust. And multiple experiments have shown that when experts express doubt, they become more persuasive. When someone knowledgeable admits uncertainty, it surprises people and they end up paying more attention to the substance of the arguments. This was helpful for me because I had, of all things yesterday, a long conversation with a friend of mine. This person and I were having a dialogue about a teaching that I gave in which this is going to get released actually on Thursday, in which I ended up saying that I feel like sometimes I don't understand Enneagram 1s. And rightly, the person said, "You are an Enneagram 1. How does this work?" And I've been kind of second guessing myself on that. Sometimes, however, the worst posture that teachers can take is that of the conveyor of doctrine, pitching ideas as though all the things they say are factual and to not be challenged. There is something about being open-handed in our presentation as communicators, as teachers, that can be quite valuable because intellectual humility is a virtue. In fact, some of the worst people are those who lack intellectual humility. Here's how right thinking works in a solidified kind of fashion. There is a place for objectivity. There is a place for saying, here are the things that I think are really core, foundational ideas that I hold. But being able to name those as presuppositions, as assumptions, even though that's subjective, is the way science works. It's the way all knowledge works. You presuppose theories, and those theories make sense of everything else. Being humble in that space matters, it seems to me. And we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go. Brené Brown writes, middle of 72, "When someone tells me I'm not sure how I feel, I'm sad, but weirdly I'm also relieved, my first thought isn't, yikes, they have no idea how they feel. My first thought is normally, oh man, I get that, and I get how those feelings can coexist. That makes sense. The uncertainty feels like self-awareness to me." That is self-awareness. Notice here, though, it's between the emotions and the feeling center for the most part. I'm guessing. Like I feel sad and I feel relieved. Maybe that's in the feeling center, but notice, they are emotions. So there are two emotions in conflict, and yet holding them in tension, that feels like an extra measure of maturity. It's just not reducing everything to, these big primary emotions. I think that's helpful. And again, giving us permission to go with her. Her next section is on amusement. Kind of pitches some ideas about, the pleasurable, relaxed excitement that we can experience. I didn't see a lot here. I'm going to move on. But if you have thoughts on amusement, let's pitch those on Tuesday. The next section's on being bittersweet. Starts with a quote from Mark Parent. "The bittersweet side of appreciating life's most precious moments is the unbearable awareness that those moments are passing." I like that as a picture of bittersweetness. She defines bittersweetness as a mixed feeling of happiness and sadness. That is more interesting than mere, amusement. And what we'll notice in this chapter is things get more and more and more complicated. And that, I think, is really helpful that she's building on one another. The thing with bittersweetness is she lists a couple of experiences a lot of us have had that are really worth naming. And notice the happiness, sadness. I'm watching my children grow up. I'm leaving a job. I'm graduating. I'm ending a relationship or getting a divorce can be a place of both happiness and sadness. Letting go of friendships that aren't working, happiness and sadness. Moving, death of a loved one. Some of us know what that's like to be happy that this has come to an end, and yet deeply sad that we've lost somebody we care for. Teachers watching students graduate, retiring, coming home from vacation. All of these have a bittersweetness to them, and that's a complex emotion. I think that's really helpful, really worth naming, and it's going to allow us to build on the next emotion she pitches, which is nostalgia. Quote I have on here is 77. "Nostalgia," she writes, "was considered a medical disease and a psychiatric disorder until the 19th century. It's a medical... Why are you thinking about the past like that? Today, researchers describe nostalgia as a frequent, primarily positive, context-specific, bittersweet emotion. bringing that back in, that combines the elements of happiness and sadness with a sense of yearning and loss. The researchers also tell us that feeling nostalgic involves putting ourselves at the center of a story in which we're reminiscing about people we are close to or about important events in our lives. Interestingly, nostalgia is more likely to be triggered by negative moods like loneliness and by our struggle to find meaning in our current lives. I associate some of that with 4s, 5s, and 9s, with withdrawn types using past tools. But I experience nostalgia, and I've said this in the past, my experience of nostalgia is what I associate with joy. I associate it with like a deep connection to how things actually are. I associate it with points in my life that have meaning, and obviously she's talking about the search for meaning here in the past. And I don't often experience what she's going to talk about next, which is kind of a nostalgia for something that's been lost and that I'm aching for. Although I suppose I could probably push into that a little bit. But she associates nostalgia at some levels with an unhealthy posture, which she's going to call rumination. This is really worth talking about. And she's going to use an extreme example. Notice, even Dr. Brené Brown, PhD, New York Times bestselling author, Enneagram 1, can't avoid the extremes. And so I feel heartened that such a brilliant, successful woman likewise pushes to the extremes. She talks about white supremacy, that these are nostalgic people. What these people speak. I wish things were the way they used to be in the good old days. What's not spoken? When people knew their place, when there was no accountability for the way my behavior affected other people, when we ignored other people's pain if it caused us discomfort, when my authority was absolute and never challenged, that's what's not spoken. I suppose that's nostalgia. I would want to question that a little bit. It feels like a desire, an emotion, a longing for power over folks based on your insecurity as a white person is what that strikes me as. But I don't know if that's nostalgia. Show Up Tuesday, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's worth talking about for sure. She quotes an author saying, they present evidence that nostalgia can be a part of both healthy and unhealthy coping strategies, depending on an individual's personality and coping style. In her study, she found that for individuals who are prone to depression or rumination, nostalgia tends to be associated with negative emotional outcomes. Again, well worth talking about here, that nostalgia and that negative experience. And so she builds on this and says, the level of divisiveness, uncertainty, and anxiety in the world today leads a lot of us to struggle with rumination. This author explains that it is an involuntary focus on negative and pessimistic thoughts. Now, Brown writes, it's important to note that she also differentiates rumination from reflection, which is highly adaptive and psychologically healthy. So the way that I took this is like in this sphere of nostalgia, there's a high and low. Y'all will know me on this front. Love high-low thinking when it comes to Enneagram. Rumination being low side nostalgia. Reflection being high side nostalgia. I think those are helpful categories. And I'm open-handed about all of that because I wouldn't want to be unhealthy given this chapter. But it felt like that was a worthwhile way to categorize, what we're experiencing and maybe give it degrees of emphasis, because rumination can be debilitating. She continues on that front. Rumination is also different from worry. According to researchers, worry is focused on the future, while rumination focuses on the past or on things about ourselves that we're stuck on. Orientation and time, come on. The future is about worry. Rumination, present focused or past focused. But the stuckedness is what I see there, is you can get stuck in these sorts of reflections, these meditations, and they can become debilitating. Really worth naming there. Asking oneself, are you ruminating on that relationship? Are you ruminating on past failures? Are you ruminating on the places that you were slighted, people didn't pay attention to you, etc.? That is something worth naming. And once you name it, you can control it. There was a season where I was waking up consistently thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. Person that helps me out really pivoted me towards saying, tell me about your future. Tell me about the things you want to create. Tell me about what you want to execute in the world. And that posture of turning from the past and even the present toward future endeavor was what I needed to click out of that. And that was really, I'll just offer that to you as a thought experiment. If you're stuck in ruminating about the same damn thing over and over again, pivot. What's your future look like? What are you going to do today with your body? What do you enjoy thinking about that brings you life? Who are the people that care about you? Those are 3 ways to think about the centers in ways that might help us escape rumination. She closes, we define nostalgia as a yearning for the way things used to be and our often idealized and self-protective version of the past. That's her definition. She closes the section with this. I would push against this. Like, when I experience nostalgia, I'm not sure that I want things to be the way they used to be. I might want to recreate them if I'm nostalgic. It gives me a little bit of energy. Nostalgia for me is it's a place of joy, meaning, and this has been my life. And I suppose I don't know what else to call that except for nostalgia. What would appreciation of the past be if not nostalgia? I don't know that I have to desire it to be in the present. So, but we're talking about, if you have opinions, join us on Tuesday. Page 81, we enter a section on cognitive dissonance, which you kind of have to say slowly. That's a tongue twister. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a state of tension, she defines, that occurs when a person holds 2 cognitions, ideals, attitudes, beliefs, opinions, that are psychologically inconsistent with each other. She gives an example. Smoking is a dumb thing to do because it could kill me. And also, I smoke a pack a day. Notice one of those is a body thing and one of them is a head thing. I believe smoking is dumb, could kill me. But my body, I smoke a pack a day. So there's like an inconsistency between the centers in this example, and it creates a state of tension. Love this again as an Enneagram idea, well worth highlighting. What do you do when the centers are at odds? Is this negative? Is it positive? How do we wrestle with this? I think there's a lot to say here. So she writes, when we're faced with information that challenges what we believe, our first instinct is to make the discomfort, irritation, and vulnerability go away by resolving the dissonance. We might do this by rejecting the new information, decreasing its importance, or avoiding it altogether. The greater the magnitude of dissonance, the greater is the pressure to reduce dissonance. So much to say here. I want to start with the head. There's an idea in 20th century thought in philosophy of science called anomalies. There's a philosopher named Thomas Kuhn who wrote on the history of science and what happens when there's major progress in the sciences. Major progress often isn't discovery after discovery after discovery. Major progress happens when whole systems are replaced by new systems. So you have Aristotelian views of physical motion, and those are replaced by Newtonian mechanics. You can't fly an airplane with Aristotle's view of physical motion. You can build an airplane with Newton's laws of gravity and the rest. Newton's laws are challenged in the 20th century by Einstein, who posits a general relativity. And with Newton's theories, you cannot create nuclear energy. With Einstein's theories, you can. But they are whole systems. It's a whole system of replacement. That's what I heard here, is that sometimes we slam into anomalies and they challenge us, and we have to shift our thinking, and sometimes we have to just live in the tension. Prior to Einstein, scientists knew that Newtonian mechanics couldn't describe the bending of light, but they didn't know why, and they just kind of lived in that tension. And that's a good place to be. It would be bad if they just kept doubling down on Newtonian mechanics when it came to light. But living in that tension allowed for eventually kind of moving forward, understanding the world. I find that helpful. That's an idea. That would be like experiencing cognitive dissonance in the mind, so too for our feelings, so too for our bodies. I suppose it's the case, like you might want to work out in the morning, you might want to sleep in. And those two things can happen at the same time in the same body. You might want to really continue this friendship. You might want to end this friendship. And those two can be at odds in the same space. And just living in that, what is it? Stabile's term, liminal space. Living in liminal space may actually be quite healthy and quite common for us, because we're going until we hit that space. Such is the art of life. Adam Grant writes, intelligence is traditionally viewed as the ability to think and learn. Yet in a turbulent world, there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more, the ability to rethink and unlearn. This is becoming much more common. I associate this with my world, with theology and doing work as a pastor. I've deconstructed is a term that's been used a lot. Grew up in a certain kind of environment. I didn't grow up. I embraced a certain kind of environment when I was in high school, college, understanding of God. And in my graduate years, really pulled that apart, really began to analyze it, critique it, rethink it. And coming out of deconstruction for me was a period of reconstruction. Like, what am I going to think about these sorts of matters moving forward? You need to unlearn some stuff, rethink some stuff, and then that will open your hands, open your mind to other possibilities, and then you can rebuild. I think that he's exactly right, that this is part of growth, maturity. It's a cognitive skill that might matter more than anything else. It seems to me, in fact, if you get into spiral dynamics, some of you will be familiar with this, but there's an idea called spiral dynamics that this is kind of something that happens through our lives over and over and over again, that we consistently are kind of hitting spots where we really have to replace some foundational values, self-understanding with something else. And that, unless you can do that, you can't grow in worthwhile ways. That doesn't mean you're doing this all the time. In fact, those spots are times of major disruption for a lot of us. But sometimes being a healthy, holistic, integrated person is going to require it. I think that at least giving us permission to say sometimes this needs to happen is valuable. Moves into the chapter on paradox. Paradoxes are interesting. So paradox is a philosophical term. It is about a pair, two, and doxology, doctrine. They two beliefs. It's the idea. So you have two beliefs, they're at odds. The most famous paradox is the liar's paradox. I come to you and I say, don't believe a word that I say. What should you do? Should I believe that you shouldn't believe a word I say? Or should I just not believe a word that you say? There's the liar's paradox. The statement that I have written on this paper is false. It's self-refuting. There's a handful of paradoxes in philosophy or religion. In my field, you'll be familiar with these. Can God create a rock so big that he can't lift it? Can God film a movie so long he can't watch it? Can God heat up a sandwich so hot that he can't eat it? Can God create a philosophical, silly-ass paradox problem so complicated that he himself can't solve it? You see where these things go. Paradox. By the way, the answer to that is, which is greater, infinity or infinity? And if you know the answer to what is greater, infinity or infinity, then you know the answer to all of these paradoxes. She pitches some paradoxes that I would call tensions. They're tensions to manage, and they have to do with values, and they have to do with like our posture to the world. So she lists them as creativity and discipline, innovation and execution, humility and audacity, freedom and responsibility. I feel like these are tensions to manage, and they're different ideas that have to, they both are good. You want to affirm them both and give each of them room to breathe, but you can't just say it's always humility all the time, or it's always discipline all the time. That's excess. That by that road, you get into excess. So a very famous one right now, dear God, hear me, is what we experience in America. The two primary values in America are justice, that would be equity, and freedom. Generally, at our best, one of the political parties really elevates freedom, and one of our parties really elevates justice and equity. And those need to be in conversation. And we need people who are of goodwill, charity, and are what do you call it? They are presenting the case well, to present the case well, so that we can move forward together with not freedom overwhelming justice and not justice overwhelming personal freedoms. There's got to be a combination there, and that strikes me as the path of wisdom. Irony and sarcasm is the next section, and this closes the chapter. She writes, I'll confess that my friend Chaz and I have so much fun with each other while trading ironic and sarcastic comments. Let me define these real quick. Irony. What is irony? Irony is a burglar's house was robbed. Irony is a cop gets a speeding ticket, right? Isn't it ironic, don't you think, that the burglar's house was robbed? Isn't it ironic that fire truck is itself on fire? These are the sorts of things that are ironic. Sarcasm is a form of humor that's meaning to expose contradictions, or like sometimes it can be kind of cutting. Sometimes it can be elevating. You're surrounded by men with knives, and you say to your buddy next to you, we've got them right where we want them. That would be an example of sarcasm, right? And but sometimes sarcasm can be, somebody drops a tray filled with dishes and food, and somebody yells out, "Hey, good job, buddy." It's sarcasm, but it's cutting. And she rightly is pointing out, there's a place for sarcasm. You have to be in safe company. She says, when I read that these behaviors can sometimes enhance close relationships and highlight closeness, I wasn't surprised. We've been friends for more than 30 years, and the verbal sparring is great fun. I asked him why he thinks it works, and we agreed that we're very careful and don't use sarcasm and irony to express emotions and thoughts that we're afraid to talk about. That's important to name. Sarcasm can be a form of passive-aggressive communication, and it actually exposes somebody who's not courageous enough to bring up hard topics with people. She concludes, we have plenty of hard conversations, and we're diligent about not weaponizing words. Sarcasm and irony are reserved for playfulness only. Nothing wrong with sarcasm or irony. High side, low side, perhaps, or they're tools that can be used well and tools that can be used badly. That's what I got. We're meeting tonight, Tuesday night. We meet every Tuesday night. If you're interested in joining us, look, here's the thing. This isn't for everybody, but it might be for you. A lot of us come to a spot where we're like, I need to get a gym membership, and I'm willing to put $20 down to encourage myself to get into that place where I'm doing work with my body that gets me healthy. Your insides are also in need of work and health and exercise. What I'm creating at aroundthecircle.org is just meant for that. You might trust the stuff that you see on this channel, and you may trust me as a guide, and I'm just creating spaces for conversation. So you'll hear lots of conversations of these sorts if you subscribe to our stuff, but we want you. This isn't for everybody, but it might be for you for this season, jump in, set aside some time just to have conversations with really thoughtful people about Enneagram, about their lives, about their numbers, about their types, about where they're going in the world. I would just strongly offer that a lot of us have nowhere else to do that. Like in our city, in our sphere of influence, our friend group, our workplace, like nobody else is really into Enneagram. This is for you. So aroundthecircle.org, find us, join us. We'd love to have you. We'll continue to do this book, and we'll start a new book in the fall, which will probably be an Enneagram book. And I have one in mind. But for the time being, hey friends, may all good things be yours.